Okay, we are live on YouTube.
Mark?
Okay. Chair Carroll,
Here.
Vice Chair Bland,
Here.
Commissioner Shamir Barron, Commissioner Chapin,
Here.
Commissioner Chen,
Here.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Here.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Here.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Here.
Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Lutfi,
Here.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Here.
All right. Good morning and welcome to the October 26th Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing and public meeting. This meeting is being held via Zoom and live streamed on our YouTube channel. So if you would like to participate in the hearing items, you may join the meeting at the estimated time, which will be shown on the screen as well as on our website. And if you would like to just watch the proceedings, you may do so at our YouTube channel. We will start the day today with a public meeting item, which is an item that has already had a public hearing and is returning with a revised proposal in response to comments made at that hearing. And then we will move to our public hearing agenda to review new applications. And with that, I will turn it over to our Director of Preservation, Corey Harala.
Thank you, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. As noted, we'll begin with public meeting item number 1. LPC 21-09652, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1389, lot 12, 19 East 74th Street in the Upper East Side Historic District. This is an Italianate style residence built circa 1869 and altered in a simplified neo-federal style by Schwartz and Gross in 1930. And the application is to replace windows, modify an opening, and construct a stair bulkhead. This was last presented at the public hearing of August 10th, 2021, and no action was taken at that time. And the staff will be presenting the revisions made in response to that comment.
And as the staff gets ready, I'll just note for the record that Commissioner Devonshire is recused on this item. And is not present for this discussion.
Just pause for just a moment while we make sure the staff is also in the meeting. Just a moment.
I'm here.
Okay, you may begin.
Okay. Good morning, Commissioners. Michelle Shabrami of the Preservation staff. The application before you at 19 East 74th Street originally came forward at the August 10th, 2021 public hearing. This is a photo of the existing building. The proposal was to enlarge the eastern masonry opening at the ground floor and replace the window with a door and transom. Replace the door and transom at the western masonry opening with a new door and transom, and replace the existing steel casement and fixed windows, featuring a different configuration and details as shown on the right. Additionally, the 6/6 double hung window at the ground floor is proposed to be replaced in kind, which will be reviewed at staff level. At that time, the commissioners expressed a consensus of support for the proposal, except with regards to the configuration and details of the proposed steel windows. They recommended exploring a different configuration, reducing the width of the mullions, increasing the number of muntins, and being more evocative of the existing windows in terms of texture and scale. The applicants have revised their design as shown on the right to feature tripartite window assemblies with paired casement windows and transoms, smaller lights, and more muntins than previously proposed. These are the sections, and they've provided this precedent as an example, 50 East 78th Street. The architect, John Wall of Stephen Harris Architects, is here if there are questions.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Commissioners, would we like to ask the applicant questions on this item? Let me see. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone with their hands raised or nodding. So I think if there are no questions for Michelle either, we can go ahead and begin our discussion. So I'm sending requests to unmute everyone. So and I want to just also note for the record that we did get a letter from the Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts in response to this revised proposal, still opposing the window configuration and preferring that the existing windows be retained. Okay, so commissioners, are we sure there are no final questions? All right, we'll move to our discussion. And so as Michelle presented, this was an application that had three components: the modifying a window to create a door, replacing the door, and replacing the windows. And at the time, the commission was comfortable with the door changes, but asked the applicants to explore either matching the historic configuration of the windows or something that was more in keeping with the age and style of those windows. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to start this one?
Okay. I think that I think this is actually an improvement over the existing. I think that the elevation is deceptive in a way because it emphasizes the major divisions between the window lights as opposed to the grid. In the photograph, if I recall, the general texture was the most prominent feature, and I think that the proposal captures that texture effectively. So I would view this as an appropriate proposal.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Goldblum. I think that this is an enhancement over the previous proposal. I have no problem with the door. I think in a way it makes it symmetrical. And just as Michael said, the reality, the truth in rendering versus the truth in rendering, I hope the result comes out better. So I deem it appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bland?
Yes, I didn't see this when it came earlier, but I'm listening and I hear what was said, and I think the applicant certainly went back to the drawing board and reconsidered the windows. And although they're not replicas of what exists, they're close enough for me at least, to accept as an appropriate change.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi?
I agree. The original windows were very deteriorated. I think this simpler design, it just fits, it works very well with the facade. It recalls what was there, but in a way, because it's simpler, I think your eye moves in a more unified way when looking at the entire facade of the building. It's not distracting, and I agree. The symmetrical aspect of the two doors at the base work well too.
Okay, great. Commissioner Jefferson?
I disagree. I think the forebay as historic fabric should be kept, and I think the proportions of the lights were different in the existing photos, and this is more modern. So I rather stay with the existing.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, I'm okay with this as is. I think it's appropriate. I mean, it's, we don't talk about what's more appropriate. I do agree with Commissioner Jefferson. If they went that way, I would have liked it more, but I think it's appropriate as is.
Okay, and Commissioner Holford Smith?
Yes, I think this is definitely an improvement over the original application. I too would have preferred to have seen the forebay configuration captured again, but I think that given the small lights and the division that they've created, it is an appropriate replacement. So I can vote for this.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
Yes, I agree with the other commissioners. I can find this appropriate.
Okay, all right. So I think we have enough to move ahead and approve this. Commissioner Goldblum, would you make the motion?
Sure. Regarding 19 East 74th Street in the Upper East Side Historic District, the application is to replace windows, modify an opening, and construct a stair bulkhead. I note that the style, scale, materials, and details of the building are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Upper East Side Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the existing windows have been modified to accommodate the installation of window air conditioners and are in a deteriorated condition, therefore their replacement is warranted. That the proposed steel casement windows will match the historic windows in terms of materials, operations, and finish. That the proportions and vertical orientation of the windows and level of and placement of the transom bars will recall the character of the historic windows and will relate well to the size of the masonry openings. A slightly simpler configuration of the proposed windows will be compatible with the character of the neo-federal style facade. The new door opening will be well scaled to the house and harmonious with the organization of the facade. That the presence of two symmetrically placed entrances at the base of the front of the facade will be in keeping with typical compositions at the ground floor of neo-federal style houses, and that the proposed ironwork and doors will be in keeping with doors typically found at houses of this type, style, and age in terms of material design, finish, and details.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin. Commissioner Chapin? Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire. Oh, so he's recused, sorry. Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Nay.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and 1 opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, so that's approved. Thank you. And we'll now move to our public hearing agenda.
Thank you, commissioners.
Okay, we'll start with public hearing item number 1, LPC 21-09930, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, block 5117, lot 56, 189 Argyle Road in the Prospect Park South Historic District. This is a colonial revival style house designed by Slee and Bryson and built in 1906 and altered in 1924. The application is to replace windows, install skylights in a patio, remove a rear porch and overhang, and demolish a garage.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. You now have control of the screen. Just click on your screen and then you can advance the slides using your arrows. Just state your name for the record and you may begin. You'll need to unmute yourself, Tom.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay,
Please state
great.
your name for the record.
Yes, Tom Kowalski. I'm the architect for 189 Argyle Road. The first slide is showing the location of the house in the historic district, Ditmas Park, or Prospect Park South. Okay, what's happening? Okay. This plan shows the outline of scope of work and pictures being taken that they're going to be showing you. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. Because I can't hear anybody. Okay, so so the shaded area here. Oh, where's okay? This is the Argyle Road. The building is fronting that. It's partially visible from a Rugby Road. The building itself, the house itself, we're not really modifying the bulk or anything like that. It's a 3-story building with a sloped roof and originally a shingle finish. We're trying to replace the windows. We give it restore the exterior. Right now it's covered with aluminum. I'll show in a second. The couple of modifications that we're trying to do is there's an old garage which is basically falling apart. We're trying to remove that permanently. From historic photos, it appears that it was not part of the original construction that took place. Then there is a slight little overhang, which is barely visible at the back right here. And so this is also something that we'd like to remove along with the porch, which was definitely built later on. So the next one, this is a historic photo showing the original kind of look of the building. Okay. Now this is the current look. What happens is that the original shingle actually is underneath and was all covered with the aluminum siding and some simplifications, like for instance, this detail here, which was curved and obviously was straightened out. There's few details like that around this portion, also covering the edges of the roof. You can see that this was completely detailed in a different way, and also the spire. So essentially, we want to restore that one-to-one basis. This is the detailed shown of some probes that we made. Most likely that shingle was painted over a couple of times at least, and then covered with the aluminum. Okay. Now there's the view. The one addition which I forgot to mention is we're trying at the skylights. The top floor has very small windows. They're about like 2 by 4, and they're also very low, so the space is very, very dark up top. Trying to kind of mimic the symmetry and the location of the skylights relative to those windows. This is the other side from the Rugby Road. Those skylights are essentially almost invisible. They are behind the chimney. The next thing is the overhang that we're trying to remove. It's also barely visible. It's kind of out of the place. There is a picture. Oh, what's happening? Okay. Right, that's a Sunborough map that shows the original overhang and the porch at the back, which was apparently different size. But I think that it is original. This is a fisheye view. The rear yard is very shallow, so this is the best we could do in terms of the trying to grab the image of the entire facade. Obviously, the things like the the AC units and all that, that's all going to be gone, filled in, and restored back to the original. This is the pictures of the connection of that overhang to the original facade, which appears that it is original or original modified. The next thing is the garage. The garage this is the view from Argyle. That's the only way to approach it. It's basically invisible during the summer. Okay, this is the view of the garage from the rear yard. That structure right now was cleaned up from Wisteria that was completely overgrown, this unit, and there is a considerable damage to the why is this? Okay, sorry. There's considerable damage to the whole structure with, huge cracks and kind of the masonry cracking everywhere. Then, okay, the other item that was on the list was the window original. Okay, I will go back very quickly just to point that out. In this particular location, most of the windows are being replaced as 6/1. There is, for some reason, in that. Why is this my cursor disappearing? Okay. All right. I don't know what's happening. My cursor is disappearing. Sorry.
You might have better luck using the arrow keys, up and down arrow keys.
No, I'm just trying to point at the windows. So this particular windows, you can see, is the prairie style. There's few of them which are prairie style. We're proposing to replace them with 1 with 6/1 that would correspond to the rest. Okay, which is the case, like you can see it here. For some reason, I skipped one slide. This is just down the road, another restored house. So we're proposing to use this color scheme and finish. So this is an example of porches that were there have divided windows, which are in your vicinity. This is a comparison, drawing comparison of what's proposed and what's existing. On the right, it's existing. On the left, is what's proposed. This is the back and that overhang, which is kind of it's just it creates a very strange condition here. These are the plans. This is the existing porch, which is wood porch. We're proposing to replace that with a stone patio. Also, we're proposing to fix the front porch, which is right now sagging by about 4 or 5 inches, so that to be rebuilt and refinished with the unpainted wood, which is present in a number of porches in that historic district. This is the plan for the top floor, existing and proposed, and the roof plan, existing and proposed. And I think that's it. Oh, sorry. And there's details for the window replacement, which is essentially one-to-one restoration. I think that's it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? I just had one question, and I'm not sure if you said it or not. Do you know when the porch was enclosed?
Oh, the one on the with the prairie style windows?
Yep.
Yeah, I believe it was closed. Let's see, original picture. I don't know that's very hard to say.
But it was
the
open.
staff. I think the staff believes it was during the 1924 alteration that's noted in the agenda listing. So the building was originally built in 1906 and altered in 1924. So we think that's when it happened or close to it. And it does show in the tax photo from the early 40s.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, we have a couple of questions. Commissioner Chapin?
It was a detailed presentation, but aren't skylights proposed, and can you show the view of those and how visible they are and so on?
Okay, so you will go back to the oh. This is view from the Rugby Road, which is less visible. And there's with the red arrow, they fall right behind that chimney, those two skylights on this side. And then the next slide, it's showing from Argyle Road. So that's the main view, that's the most visible that they are. This is the view from other side of the street. So that's the angle is like the most visible angle.
So from straight on, you think you don't see them if you're
standing in front of the house, like for instance, where the blue tarp is, you would not see it.
But across the street and from
across the street, you definitely would see it. Yes, that's why we took this picture, because this is, the in a sense, least favorable, angle. meaning that makes it the most visible.
Thank
And
you
obviously, if you go the other way, you know, the tree would obstruct it, so you wouldn't see it. So this is really the only clear view of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Holford Smith.
Yes, I have a question about the windows. You said you're replacing them with 6 or 9/1.
Right.
Your elevations show them as being, some of them 1/1 and some of them 6 and 9/1.
Yeah, we replaced them as per the tax photo. So that was the original. In fact, that the window replacement has been already approved last year. So we replaced them, you know, on a kind of one-to-one basis. So original approved replacement of the windows included the prairie windows too. So right now, so in this application, we're proposing to alter the prairie windows to 6 or 9/1.
Okay.
And so as seen in the tax photograph, it seemed like the multi-light upper sashes were only present in those top floor windows.
Top floors, yes.
Whatnot, and the rest were 1/1s, other than the porch, which was enclosed later with the different configuration.
And the 2 top windows on the front are remaining, existing to remain 6/1?
No, the all windows are replaced, but they replaced exactly the same. So, and some of them, like you see in this picture we see here, there's like the funny windows, the storm windows, which are on the left side. So obviously they're wearing like this. So they're going to be back to the same type. The whole top floor was like that.
Okay, so the windows have been approved already to be replaced to match the conditions seen in the tax photo, and including the prairie style windows. And today the application is just concerning the windows, the prairie style windows.
Yes.
And the skylights and the removal of the porch at the rear and the patio and the removal of the garage.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks. All right, other questions? Okay, I think we don't have any other questions at this time, so we will now move to our testimony portion. If you'd like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And we will, as always, start with anyone who signed up in advance and then get to anyone else. So even if you have signed up in advance, though, raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And I'm going to turn it over to Sasha Seeley, who will take us through the testimony.
So I have one sign up for this item, Lynn Funk from Victorian Society, New York. I'm going to promote you to panelists. And should be in the meeting now. Ask you to unmute your mic.
Unmute. Okay. Yes. Good morning. Good morning, commissioners.
Good morning.
State your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes to speak.
This is Lynn Funk for the Victorian Society of New York. Founded in New York in '66, Victorian Society is dedicated to fostering the appreciation and preservation of 19th century and early 20th century heritage. The New York chapter promotes preservation of our historic districts, individual landmarks, and interiors civic art too. There are several aspects of the proposed alteration at 189 Argyle, which Victorian Society finds appropriate. We have no problem demolishing the minimally detailed garage, which is sadly deteriorated and has no relationship to the house stylistically, or removing the small porch at the rear, which, while original, is simply detailed and not visible from the street. Nor do we object to the new door openings and new deck on the rear facade, as are not visible and relatively minor changes. Finally, removal of the aluminum siding and restoration of the wood shingle cladding will bring the house much closer to its original condition, and the proposed paint scheme seems fine. However, we cannot support 2 parts of the proposal: removal of arts and crafts style windows on the sun porch and the installation of new shingle cladding right down to the ground. Commissioners, the designation report for 189 Argyle states that very little original detail remains on this aluminum sided 2.5-story frame dwelling, but does mention the double hung windows in the sun porch added in 1924. The applicant is proposing to discard these 97-year-old windows, arts and crafts style, and install 9/1, similar to the sash at the third floor gable, a decision that will eliminate the actual historic material and blur distinction between the original building and 1924 addition. These windows should be retained, and should they be deteriorated, note that not only the staff, but some of the commissioners can give excellent advice on historic sash restoration. The second part of the proposal, we object.
You have went over your time.
Okay.
Right.
We'd like the siding not to go to the ground. Thank you very much.
Alrighty, thank you. To change the roll back to attendee. And I'm looking to see if I have any more hands raised, and I do not see any more hands raised. Oh, so up one more hand. Let's see, this is for the next item.
Okay. All right. And I know that they went over their 3 minutes, but as we did receive a letter from them, and the other concern they had was about the siding going all the way down to the ground, noting that other buildings in the district by this architect had brick foundations. So we'll ask the applicant.
One more hand raised by John Graham. Let me just. Okay, John, your mic is unmuted. You should be able to speak. You're in the meeting.
Hello, Commissioners. John Graham speaking as a private citizen. I would like to point out an objection to the proposal to run the new shingles right to the ground. I visited the site, and I also looked at other houses in the district and other houses by the same architect, John Slee, either alone or in his partnership with Slee and Bryson. I visited 4 of his other houses. 2 are brick clad and 2 are shingle clad. All 4 of them have brick foundations. I believe there's a good chance this house does also. A probe behind the existing aluminum siding at this ground level should be done, and the results should determine the design. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Okay, I do not see any more hands raised. That concludes the testimonies.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I'll also note for the record that the community board chose not to review this item, and that we have a letter from the Prospect Park South Association having expressed support for this application. Okay, I'd like to turn back to the applicant now and see if you would like to respond to the comments. 1 about the window configuration, and 2 about the foundation and the question about whether the siding should come all the way down.
Yes. So in terms of the windows, I did talk about that item with my client, and their preference is for the 6/, or 9/1. However, they're fine with restoring them as per approved originally approved application. Now, regarding the brick bottom, it is. I did actually investigate that, and what happens is that the brick is somewhat it's quite deteriorated, and is also not at the porches, and we have 3 porches, 1 open and 2 closed. And they do not have brick foundation. They have brick pillars, columns. So if we don't run the siding all the way to the ground, it will be, so to speak, standing on the brick legs, because there's basically nothing there. However, what we could do is essentially once we take the aluminum off, we could basically cover the new shingle would cover only the portions when there is no brick, and then we would leave the brick exposed. And, you know, obviously that will have to be repointed and repaired in quite a few places. Uh-oh.
I'm muted. Thank you for the response. Commissioners, are there any final questions? All right, I am going to start requesting to unmute all of you so that we can close the hearing and begin our discussion. All right, Commissioner Lutfi, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, we'll begin our discussion now. And there is a lot of restoration work here that, as has been noted, has already been approved, including the replacement of windows to match the condition and seen in the tax photo. So we're looking at the porch and porch windows, the removal of the rear porch, the removal of the garage, and the skylights. So we'll try to focus our comments around those.
If I could just
Yes.
interject briefly, the restoration work that's also been discussed has not been permitted yet and is still under review with the staff, and we're aware of some of these issues in working with the applicant. So as is the case sometimes, there's other work shown on these drawings that not things that were scheduled for review by the commissioners because the staff is still working in progress with the architect. And so the siding is one of those things that we'll look at closely at the foundation along the house and around the porch.
Okay, great. So that will be handled and reviewed and studied at staff level. Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Holford Smith, would you start this one?
Sure. I'll start with the easy piece, which I think is the garage. I think that's appropriate to demolish. And I think that the rear overhang and small wood deck also is appropriate to remove as it's minimally visible. I think the new masonry deck is acceptable along with the slight changes to the openings of the back elevation, as you see here. I found it very interesting to listen to the testimony about the windows because I was originally okay with the 9/1 windows, but I really appreciate the fact that installing the 9/1 does sort of mix the styles and mix up the history of the house. So I'm actually in favor of keeping the prairie style based on the 1924 alterations.
Okay.
I think the skylights at the rear of the roof are fine, but I do think that the ones that face the street are not appropriate as they are highly visible. So I think just the two at the rear. And I guess as the siding being dealt with at staff level?
The siding will be dealt with at staff level.
Okay, so I was going to point out another house that they put in their presentation on page 17 shows the porch with brick piers. So
okay, great.
But I think that's it.
All right, that's great. The staff will look at that. All right, Commissioner Chapin.
I agree with everything Commissioner Holford Smith just said, so I won't make any further comments and just say that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
I agree too with most of what Ann had said. I'm actually okay with the skylights in the front. They don't, they are visible, but I think that one sees that on houses of this age, and it's. I think I would have approved it. I think it'd be appropriate. And the only other thing I would just ask the staff to look at is those brackets or exposed beams at the front of the house that don't appear on the elevation that were part of the existing. It'd be very easy to replicate those as a part of that effort. But I think this is and I agree with everything about the removals of the porch and the garage. And I also agree about the front porch windows. In general, this is a big win for the neighborhood. It's a beautiful, beautiful house.
Yes, it is. And it's, I think, it's hard to appreciate that in its current condition. So I agree this will be a great addition for the neighborhood or contribution to the neighborhood. Commissioner Devonshire.
Yeah, I agree. It'll be a tremendous addition. While I'm in favor of demolition of the garage, I think it's sort of sad to see it go. I had a thesis student a few years ago who did her thesis on garages and the coming of the automobile in America. And I think that garage probably represents a good part of that history, but it hasn't been maintained. And it's a really sad carbuncle at this point. The other thing that I am okay with, well, and in any case, I agree with what Ann said about the prairie windows. I also feel that the skylights on the front facade can remain. There's going to be enough going on this building that they will be a minor obstruction. I do hope that the staff will pay attention to the wood siding going to the ground. It's not good practice to have wood in close proximity to ground. There's going to be splashback, there's going to be snow against it, and it's going to rot out in about 3 years. And I think, design-wise, aesthetically, the brick foundation would be better. And I think in terms of performance, it would be better to have the wood away from grade.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I agree with almost all the comments, and I'll leave it to the commission to see whether the skylight window in the front is appropriate or not. Seems like the two Michaels have no problem. Yeah, so, but
Okay.
I agree with Ann Smith's comments.
Okay, all right. We may need you to take a position on those skylights, but we'll see how it turns out. Okay, Commissioner Bland.
I'm not going to repeat everything that I'm in agreement with, but I do want to repeat the idea of keeping the prairie style windows in that enclosed porch. It's just simply part of that enclosure piece of history that the house went through, and I think they're handsome. Leave a little bit of evidence of the change of use of the form of the house at that point. I would be against the skylights in the front, but not so much that it would jeopardize my vote. I'm happy to sway either way on that. But I want to finally say this is just one of my favorite historic districts, and this house, of course, has been noted. Will, in its renovated form, join the other extraordinary gems. The eclecticism of this district is simply mind-blowing. But more than even the houses and the architecture, the layout of the subdivision is extremely interesting and important historically to the subdivision of America. The layout of the street, the lawn piece next to the curb, then the sidewalk, et cetera, is all very well thought through. And it's an extraordinary little piece of our city.
Agree to that for sure. Okay, Commissioner Lutfi.
Yeah, I want to echo that sentiment about this district. It is wonderful and always a pleasure to move through it. It really is a special and different place in the city. I agree with all of the comments of my fellow commissioners, including Michael Goldblum's about the brackets. I think that the skylights in the front should come off because they are very visible and they seem out of sync with the facade of the building.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Jefferson?
Yes, I agree with Commissioner Ann, and I may add that the building composition is cleaner and simplified. These guys did a good job.
All right, great. Thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Holford Smith. The windows should be restored, and there shouldn't be skylights on the front of the house. I do want to comment that I appreciate the applicant's efforts to restore the rest of the house, and also the homeowner's willingness to be flexible about the windows, I think, is very much appreciated.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I think having moved around all of the discussion here, where we are is where Commissioner Holford Smith started, and I think the majority of commissioners would not support the skylights on the front, and that all commissioners would like to see the existing window configuration at the porch remain. So Commissioner Holford Smith, would you make that motion?
Yes. In the matter of LPC 21-09930, 189 Argyle Road in the Prospect Park South Historic District. A colonial revival style house designed by Slee and Bryson and built in 1906 and altered in 1924. Application is to replace windows, install skylights in the patio, remove a rear porch and overhang, and demolish a garage. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Prospect Park South Historic District. I also note that the garage is a simply designed secondary structure built after the construction of the main house. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the proposed 9/9.
You can just strike that
Skip
first
that.
finding and
Okay. Yes. That skylights proposed at the west rear facing portion of the main roof will only remove a limited amount of modern asphalt shingles and will be seen only from limited oblique angles from public thoroughfares. That the overhang and rear porch are simple in design, and the removal will not eliminate a significant architectural feature or detract from the unified facade composition. That the removal of the overhang and porch will only be minimally visible from public thoroughfares. That the proposed patio will be well scaled in relation to the building in your yard, will be typical in terms of materials and design, and will not be visible from a public thoroughfare. That the garage is in a deteriorated condition and is a simply designed secondary structure built after the main house and is not a unique or significant example of buildings of this type, age, and style. That the garage is seen only from limited views from the public thoroughfare as a background element. Therefore, its demolition will not detract from the site, streetscape, or historic district, and that the work will not diminish the special character of the building or the historic district. However, I find that the skylights proposed at the east-facing portion of the main roof are highly visible from public thoroughfares and detract from the significant architectural features of the building, and that the prairie-style windows in the porch, enclosed porch, are more typical or reflected later alterations to the house and should be maintained. So therefore, I recommend that the skylights proposed at the east-facing portion of the main roof be eliminated and that the prairie-style windows at the enclosed porch be maintained.
That the configuration of the
Configuration be
style.
maintained, yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
So that's approved with those modifications. Please continue to work with the staff on those aspects of the proposal as well as the restoration work. Thank you. And we'll
Thank
now
you.
move, thank you. We'll move to the next item now.
Okay, moving on to item number 2, LPC 22-02142, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 612, Lot 36, 33 Charles Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District. This is a row house built in 1869, and the application is to construct rooftop and rear yard additions.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. Just click on your screen, and then you can use the arrow keys to advance the slides. State your name for the record, and you may begin.
John Wool, Stephen Harris Architects.
Good morning, Commissioners. Richard Larry, LPC. I will present the proposal, and the architect, John Wool, is here to answer any questions. Well, we have the shower there down in that corner. So the shower is here. Okay. So the reason for the proposal is that the applicant seeks to construct a one-story rear rooftop addition when there is already a rear addition. As you can see from the site plan, the row house on Charles Street is located near the northwest corner of Charles Street and 7th Avenue South. And as you hear is the aerial site plan. And here's the front elevation, and this is just to show that it is currently, it's located next to a very tall apartment building. Here's a 1940s tax photograph. And here is the rear elevation and a proposed rendering just showing you the scope of work. So there's an existing one-story rear addition that they are going to cut back and then add a second story and then add a one-story rooftop addition. And then here just the existing and proposed renderings showing you the details. And then a block plan with the building highlighted existing shows you a mix of those rear additions are predominantly two-story. And then this shows the proposed, the reduction of the existing one-story rear addition and the siding of the proposed penthouse. And just the back, the rear elevations of the row of houses and the proposed elevation, rear elevation. This is just some photographs of the mock-up that was constructed. And based on the visibility assessment conducted throughout the neighborhood, there was no visibility over the front facade, and the rear facade is not visible either from any public thoroughfare. And then just gives you the sense of the sight lines and then the materials palette for the proposed rear addition and the modification of the rear addition and to the windows of the large opening and the rooftop addition. Just gives you the existing section and then the proposed. So they're cutting about 5'1" off the existing one-story rear addition to 6 feet, and then adding a second story. The proposed rooftop addition is set some 17 feet 4 inches from the plane of the front facade, and it's set back 2 foot 6 inches from the plane of the rear facade. That concludes the presentation, commissioners. Thank you very much. And the architect, John Wool, is here to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. And just so to be clear, the reason this is before us is because they're proposing a rooftop and a rear yard addition together, and the commission must evaluate the cumulative effect of two additions. All right, John, would you like to go? John, Mr. Wall, would you like to go ahead and add anything at this time?
I would just add that I know that the current LPC rules ask that a rooftop addition in a condition like this be set back 3 feet from the rear facade. And I'd like to point out that given the uniqueness of its location within the donut, both up against a tall apartment building to the side and directly behind a taller tenement building to the north, that I think that our attempt here to try to acknowledge that, but still maintain at least a 12-foot deep room, led us to the 2 foot 6 dimension.
All right, great, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, I'm not seeing any questions at this time, so we'll move to public testimony, and we may have questions after that. So I'm going to now turn it over to Sasha Seeley, who will walk us through the testimony. And if you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you, and we'll begin with anyone who signed up in advance. Sasha?
Okay, I have one sign up, so I'm going to go ahead from Village Preservation. Anna Markham, promote you to panelist. You should be in the meeting. Let me ask you. to unmute your mic. Okay, Anna, you can go ahead, state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak and turn on your camera if you wish.
Okay, great. Thank you. The camera should be on. Okay, there we are. Good morning, commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Anna Markham, and I am the Director of Research and Preservation at Village Preservation. I am speaking on behalf of the organization today. Village Preservation opposes the proposed alterations to 33 Charles Street. We would regret seeing an otherwise beautifully intact Italianate row house approved for alteration in a way that makes it significantly less intact on the exterior. While we understand that the rear exterior is minimally visible to the public, we still believe that the unnecessary replacement of the second-story windows and addition of a terrace is detrimental to the historic integrity of the building. Eliminating the 2 historic windows for 1 large steel window that opens onto a terrace completely erases any trace of the original massing of windows of the building, and approving another one of these rear facade alterations strengthens an already troubling historically insensitive precedent in the district. We should also note that while the proposed rooftop addition is minimally visible to the public, it is regrettable to see an intact roof line like this destroyed. Too much of the historic integrity of this lovely Italianate row house would be lost due to the proposed set of changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I am going to take a look. I don't see any hands raised. All
Okay,
right.
great. Thank you. And I'll just note that we also did receive a letter from a neighbor in opposition, and we received a resolution from Community Board 2 recommending approval of the application. Okay. Mr. Wall, would you like to respond to the comments we've heard?
Certainly, thank you. I would just point out 2 things. Richard, I don't know, can I manipulate the screen or can you pull the presentation back up? If we could look at the rear elevations of the context, that would be great. That's great, thank you. So go forward, actually, if you could, thanks. I would note that to the comments made by Village Preservation, 2 things. The row has relatively narrow houses that are all approximately 16 to 17 feet wide. So the amount of masonry actually being removed by joining those 2 openings is quite minimal. It also has precedent both at 41 and 37 on this same row for having been approved. So I think that that is consistent both with the Commission's desire to maintain the jam condition of masonry on these 2 windows and make sure that that does not disrupt the fenestration of the rear. And so we've tried to work with that objective in mind. Relative to the rooftop addition, again, there's a rooftop addition at 41, as there are other rooftop additions throughout the district that are not visible from the public right of way. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, commissioners, any final questions? Okay, not seeing any final questions. I am now requesting to unmute all of you so we can make a motion to close the hearing and begin our discussion. All right, Commissioner Bland, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And so we are looking, as we stated before, at the proposal for a non-visible rooftop addition and alterations to the rear facade that are also not visible, including cutting back the ground floor of the addition to make it less steep and doing a second floor, and then combining windows at the second floor opening that are comparable to other windows in this row, which and comparable to other windows we've approved. I'm not sure if we approved number 37 and 41, but we've approved others. So with that, let's go ahead and start our discussion. Commissioner Gustafson, would you like to start this one?
Sure. Relative to market, this is an easy one for me. I think it's completely appropriate. It's not visible from the street. the top floor is going to be retained, and it keeps the rhythm of the rest of the row houses. The depth is no further than what else is in the donut. And the design is similar to those around it. So no issues whatsoever.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith?
I agree with Commissioner Gustafson. I think that the cumulative effect is not overwhelming the original house. And I think that, as you said, the design of the fenestration is similar to what's already in the row, and that the penthouse being adjacent to the taller apartment building makes it appropriate and does not overwhelm the house or the small donut that's there.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I could approve this. The commission regularly approves these types of fenestrations, including on this row for, especially for very narrow houses, which do not have sufficient light inside. And the lack of visibility also makes me feel, of the rooftop, makes me feel that this is quite appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
I agree with what's been said. I think it's appropriate.
All right, Commissioner Devonshire?
He's recused from this item.
Oh, he's recused. I'm sorry. Thank you for noting that. So he's recused and
Yeah.
has not been present for this entire discussion. Okay, Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I agree with the comments.
All right, Commissioner Bland?
Yeah, I think we've created our own precedent time and time and time again in this district and in many other brownstone districts. So this seems to be very respectful. It doesn't overwhelm the house. And I'm in favor of those extra 6 inches that we normally don't give at that top floor setback. But in this case, I think it's acceptable.
Okay, great, thanks. And Commissioner Lutfi?
I agree with my fellow commissioners. It's this proposal is very understated. It harmonizes well with what's there. It is not visible. It's a good project.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
I find it appropriate.
All right, thank you. All right, so I think we are all in agreement. And Commissioner Gustafson, would you make the motion?
Matter of LPC 22-02142, 33 Charles Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District. The application is to construct rooftop and rear yard additions. I note that the building scale, style, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Greenwich Village Historic District. I recommend approval, noting that the proposed work will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features, that the proposed work will not be visible from any public thoroughfare, that the rear addition will not rise to the full height of the rear facade, and the top floor will be retained, thereby preserving the building's relationship to others in the row, that the depth of the rear addition will be consistent with the depth of other rear additions found within the central green space, that the brick-clad rear addition featuring a large masonry opening with multi-light window and door assembly will feature a level of articulation, materials palette, and ratio of solid to void that is consistent with other rear additions found at other buildings of this type within this historic district. That the rooftop addition will be moderate in size and set back from the front and rear facades, thereby not overwhelming the house and maintaining a sense of its original massing, and that the proposed work will not detract from the building or the Greenwich Village Historic District.
Thank you. And Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second that motion?
I second it.
Thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum. Commissioner Goldblum,
Sorry, aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 9 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, so that's approved. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you. And we'll move to the next item now.
Next item is public hearing item number 3, LPC 22-01992, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan Block 487, Lot 20, 399 West Broadway in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. This is a store building constructed circa 1860, and the application is to establish a master plan governing the future installation of painted wall signs.
Commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. Please state your name for the record, and you may begin. You'll need to unmute yourself. Nicholas, you're still muted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please state your name for the record.
Okay, this is Nicholas Cummins with Colossal Media Group. Sorry about the delay. The control of the screen and the unmute button, couldn't find out how to do both. Thank you for your time this morning. This presentation, as noted, is for a certificate of appropriateness for a master plan for a painted wall advertising sign at 399 West Broadway. So here is the zoning map. The property 399 West Broadway is in the M15A zone. As you can see on the lot diagram, the proposed sign space is facing south on West Broadway. It's between Spring Street and Broome Street. This is the current condition of the wall. You can see from this side of the street and across the street, you get a full view of this entire facade section. And then as you get farther away, you can see the sort of the top half. Our proposal for the sign is a 14.5 by 12 foot, 170 square foot sign space. This occupies less than 20% of the visible facade. The whole facade is 900 square feet, and the sign space itself is 174. We are asking for a 2-foot setback from the primary facade, and it's 3.5 feet from the roof line. There are no windows or significant architectural features on this secondary facade, and it is facing south-southwest. The historic photos here show that there is a historic sign present on this facade. The resolution on this copy of the presentation is a little low, so it's kind of hard to read, but it does at least say the word castor. We can expect that's an ad for castor oil. This is the wall space across the street. This is 393 West Broadway, which is just across from 399. So this is the wall we're proposing a sign on. This is the wall across from it. This wall you can see in this 1940s photo, it is very faint. Again, the resolution's not amazing on this version of the presentation, but you can see there is also a faded wall sign on this facade as well. That is relevant because as I get down to the sort of current condition of this facade and the one next to it, there is an approved master plan and painted sign on that facade as well, which you can see right here. And so we just wanted to point out that there is historic precedent for 2 signs on those 2 buildings facing each other. So here are the rest of the approved master plans in the Soho Cast Iron District and Extension. Here is the location in blue of the proposed sign. Again, it's right across from 393. And the details of the proposed master plan are consistent with prior approved master plans. It's under 20% of the visible facade. There will be a 3-inch standard black or white border to contrast against the sign content. And it does have a vendor plaque with the prior approved size of 20 inches in height by 36 inches in width. So this is the current condition, the surrounding area. This is in context with 393 West Broadway. Both buildings as seen from the south, both buildings as seen from the north. and then some approved and painted sign under the same master plan. So as we've all seen in prior applications, the content regulation element is no longer being included on new master plans, and it has been amended from some existing master plans. So these signs were painted under that no content restriction master plan that we're asking for this location. So that's my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Okay, not seeing any questions. I just had one question. So I appreciate that you showed us that historically those two buildings facing each other both had painted wall signs. And I think in the historic photographs, did those wall signs come all the way to the front facade? I think that's typically the historic condition.
Yes, we actually I have not seen an example of a historic sign with an intentional setback. I think if you're just going around placing signs, you want them to be the most visible, marketable to your clients and advertisers. And so maximizing that visibility, you basically have a 0-foot setback.
Right.
The wall across from the wall that we're proposing, 393, does have a 2-foot setback, which is consistent with what we're asking for this location.
Okay, got it. Thank you. All right. Any other questions, commissioners? Commissioner Lutfi, please go ahead. Oops. Commissioner Lutfi, just you have to unmute. I sent you a request.
Is the 2-foot setback consistent with what we do now? Or is that an old?
So in recent approvals, we've generally seen a larger setback, more like 3 to 5 feet, but we recently approved one that was closer based on an earlier approval. So some of our earlier approvals had signs going closer to the facade. And as we just discussed, that historically the signs typically did go up to the facade. And this sort of setback is something that we've developed over time in terms of its relationship to the sign's relationship to the facade, but it's not based on a typical historic placement. So in this case, the sign that was approved on the opposite facing wall was approved with a 2-foot setback, and that's what they would be matching in this proposal.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks. Other questions? Okay, let's see if we have anyone here who'd like to speak on this application. Sasha, I'll turn it over to you to see if we have any speakers. And if you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you.
Okay, so I do not have any signups in advance for this item, and I'm looking to see if I have any hands raised. And there are no hands raised, so no testimonies for this item.
All right, great. And I'll note that we did receive a resolution from Community Board 2 recommending approval of the application. All right, any final questions? Mr. Cummins, any final remarks before we close the hearing and begin our discussion?
Nope, thank you.
Okay, thanks. So commissioners, I'm going to start requesting to unmute all of you so we can make a motion to close the hearing. All right, Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Devonshire, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thanks. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. The hearing's closed and we'll begin our discussion. This is for a master plan for painted wall signs that uses the established criteria that we have been approving. It would be a master plan for 10 years, which is also the typical time frame that we approve. And in terms of the placement on this wall, we've discussed both historic conditions and previously approved conditions, and this setback would match the approved sign on the opposite facing wall. Commissioner Wellington, would you start this one?
Yeah, I think that the sign is fine, except that I think we should have a setback per our standard requirement.
Okay. Commissioner Bland?
I'm less romantic about these signs than others, I think. I think that map showing the proliferation of them all over Soho is worrisome. But nonetheless, I accept that they are here to stay and part of what we have traditionally regulated and accept. I just think the same thing that Commissioner Chen just said. It should be pushed back to at least 3 feet.
Okay. And Commissioner Lutfi?
I agree. I think it should move back to 3 feet.
Okay. Commissioner Jefferson?
I'm in agreement with my fellow commissioners.
Okay. Commissioner Gustafson?
Agreed.
Commissioner Holford Smith?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Commissioner Chapin?
I will go along with my fellow commissioners. However, I think that the fact that the one facing it is 2 feet and it would mean that in this case, I would approve 2 feet, but there seems to be a majority for 3 feet, not pushing it back an additional 3 feet, but just 3 feet.
Yeah. Okay. Commissioner Goldblum?
Diana, on this one, I'm okay with it as is, but I certainly would vote for 3 feet.
Okay. Commissioner Devonshire?
3 feet.
All right. And I also would have supported the 2 feet because I know that we have in some cases approved some that are closer to the facade, and this would match one that was approved on the opposing wall. And so I would have found that appropriate, but the majority of commissioners have expressed
Uh-oh.
Sarah?
Yeah.
She just drop off completely?
She said that her location might have touchy service.
So let's give her a minute, but if not, then Fred, maybe you can
pick it up.
You can lead the rest of this hearing for this item, and you can pick someone to read the motion, and we can go through it, and hopefully she'll join.
Yeah, I can read the motion. Let me read it.
Okay.
In the matter LPC 22-01992, 399 West Broadway, Soho, Cast Iron Historic District, the application is to establish a master plan governing the future installation of painted wall signs. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the painted wall signs are a traditional method of advertising that was historically found in this historic district, typically on plain secondary facades with exposed common brick masonry, that the painted application of the signage will be in keeping with the traditional application methods and commercial character of painted wall signs historically found on buildings within this historic district, that there is photographic evidence of historic painted wall signs at this building, and 393 West Broadway, therefore having the two signs in close proximity is in keeping with the historic character of the streetscape, that the sign will be located at the undeveloped secondary elevation, and therefore the sign will not detract from any significant architectural features of the building, that the proposed master plan will permit a painted non-illuminated wall sign that covers less than 20% of the visible wall surface, a coverage percentage that's consistent with prior commission approvals, that the combination of the placement and size of the sign will help it remain a subordinate presence at the building and within the streetscape, regardless of the type of graphics or number of colors used within the body of the sign, that the sign will include a 3-inch solid painted border, a typical feature of historic wall signs, that the vendor tag will have a set location and size, and that the proposed master plan will be valid for a period of 10 years, and the applicant will document every sign approved under the master plan, so there will be a record of the commission can consider when reviewing the effectiveness of the master plan criteria. However, I find that the placement of the sign setback only 2 feet from the primary facade is less than the predominant setback typically required by the commission, for painted wall signs and may detract from the significant feature of the front facade. Therefore, I recommend that the sign be set back from the primary facade by at least 3 feet.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum, will you second that?
Second.
Mark, will you call the roll?
Chair Carroll. Not back on yet. Commissioner Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Devinger.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 9 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, we'll
Let's go to the
move on
next
to the
item.
next item, hearing item number 4, LPC 21-09093, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 646, Lot 7503, 33 9th Avenue, aka 401 to 403 West 13th Street in the Gansevoort Market Historic District. This is a neo-Romanesque style warehouse building designed by Boring and Tilton and built in 1902 to 03, and the application is to install signage.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. They now have control of the screen. You just need to click on your screen and use the arrow keys to advance the slides. Please state your name for the record and you may begin.
Good morning, commissioners. Thanks for having us. My name is Matt Calvo from Building Brothers, and our proposal is regarding 33 9th Avenue in Manhattan. It's currently a Tourneau Rolex facility where they sell watches. The building itself is located in the Gansevoort Historic District. The building was built in 1902. Formerly, original use was a liquor warehouse. You could see in these historic pictures some photographic precedent right here of an existing sign on the corner of the building. Here's some current existing condition photographs, and the store occupies some space on West 13th Street as well as on 9th Avenue. Here is a rendering of what we're proposing. Our proposal is twofold. We want to retrofit the existing window signs with illumination. They currently are non-illuminated. We also want to add a illuminated clock sign at the corner that spans to run across each facade. This is West 13th Street elevation. Here's the 4th window sign as well as the other face of the clock. These are the window signs. There's some reading Rolex, others reading Tudor, and just the layout for the conduit and the mounting. Here's a section view showing the sign from the side. It's installed inside the transom, so there's no penetration into the building itself. Here's some existing photographs of the signs as they appear now. Again, they're here from a previous approval from Landmarks, and we're interested in upgrading them to include internal illumination. A closer look at the conduit. It's extremely thin, as you can see here, and it would run from letter to letter to provide the electrical for the illumination. Here's a rendered image of what it would look like in the daytime at the corner. Here's some more specifics on the clock itself, including dimensions and mounting points. There's basically a bracket. This frame gets attached to the
building, and then the clock gets mounted to it. Here's another rendered image from looking from 9th Avenue and from the corner. Here's a sample of what it might look like at night. As we saw in the beginning, there was a sign here previously, but you can also see this painted sign remnants is still there on the building today, and it will not be covered by any of our proposed signs. And that's the end of our presentation. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have questions? I can't see, but as last week, I can't see on my screen if Mark or anybody.
There are no hands raised.
Oh, thank you, Corey. So we can turn to Sasha, I guess, and ask for her to lead us in the public
Yes,
testimony.
into the public testimony. So I have a couple of signups for this item. First, I'm going to be bringing in Diego Roballo from Historic District Council. Voting you to panelist, Diego. You should be in the meeting. You can state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes.
My name is Diego Roballo from the Historic Districts Council. The proposed projecting sign on the corner interrupts the overall austerity and massing of the building. We find it to be unnecessary and inappropriate. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next I'm going to bring in John Graham from Victorian Society. Okay, John, you should be in the meeting. You can go ahead and unmute your mic.
Good morning, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society. The Victorian Society in New York is joined in its testimony on this project by Save America's Clocks, a not-for-profit organization that works to identify and preserve historic public clocks in New York City and throughout the country, and that encourages the maintenance in working condition of all public clocks so as to avoid sending a message that nobody's home and no one cares. The city's official clockmaster, Marvin Schneider, is a member of the board. The two organizations support this proposal for installation of illuminated signs behind the transom glass and an illuminated corner clock. The transom signs are diminutive in scale and are a far better solution to identification than application of signs to the historic masonry of this building. The slender support framework and cables will be minimally visible. The provision of public clocks in commercial buildings has a long history, with their installation often post-dating construction of the building. They were especially typical for buildings housing jewelry, watch, and clock businesses. Perhaps the most well-known of these added clocks, though not for that type of business, is the sun clock at the A.T. Stewart store at 280 Broadway. This clock was installed nearly 100 years after construction of the original building. Public clocks, the sun clock included, are by their nature meant to call attention to themselves, yet historically they managed to do this without, at the same time, detracting from the buildings to which they are attached. Just the opposite, they often exist in a synergistic relationship. We are not certain that the Rolex clock proposed at 33 9th Avenue will reach the level of affection felt for the sun clock and others of its type, but the proposed scale and simple, elegant design of clock fit the simple but well-crafted details of this handsome warehouse. Its two-sided corner location is also perfectly suited to a corner building, and in fact, the proposed location historically incorporated an applied corner sign of somewhat larger size. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Okay, and then I have one more sign up. Anna Markham from Village Preservation. I have promoted you to panelist. Anna, you should be in the meeting. You can go ahead and state your name for the record and unmute your mic.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Good morning, commissioners, yet again, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Anna Markham, and I am the Director of Research and Preservation for Village Preservation. I am speaking on behalf of the organization today. Village Preservation strongly opposes this application and urges the commissioners to deny this proposal. The corner illuminated sign is exceptionally large at 6 6 feet by 4 feet with a depth of a little over 7 inches. An illuminated sign at this location will significantly detract from the rare painted ghost sign on this building. Ghost signs are crucial to maintaining a connection to the Market Street history of this area. The Gansevoort Market Historic District was the result of a long battle to gain landmark protection for this rapidly changing neighborhood. Given that there is no historic or even contemporary precedent for a large illuminated sign of this nature in the district, it would be egregious to consider approving this one. While the corner sign is the most obtrusive element of this proposal, the interior signs are unnecessarily illuminated and do not conform to the regulations that retail signage be placed at least 18 inches from the window pane. Overall, this proposal is inappropriate for the Gansevoort Market Historic District, and we urge the commission to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you. And now that is our signups. Those are all our signups. Let me see. I don't see any more hands raised. So that is it. And Sarah, would you like me to add in the community board recommendation?
Yes, if you can do that, that would be great.
Oh,
okay. Community Board 2 recommends denial of the application, finding the illumination and the clock to be inappropriate. And we've also received two written testimonies from the public.
2 written letters from the public. We did, I just got back into the meeting. Did we hear from the Victorian Society?
Yes, we did.
Okay. And I think that's everybody that's on the list, I believe, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you all. I'm sorry I dropped off, so thank you for continuing so seamlessly. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Let's turn back to the applicant and ask if they would like to respond to the comments we've heard.
My only response would be with regard to it being excessive with illumination. In the evening, it's quite dark in the area, and there's not much of a chance for the store to show that they exist at that location. Apart from that, I agree with everything that Mr. Graham said about the clock adding a lot of intrigue and fitting in with the neighborhood. So that was my only response.
Okay, thank you. All right. Commissioners, any final questions? All right, we are going to now move to our discussion. And Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Holford-Smith, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. So the proposal is for the internally illuminated signs within the transoms and the corner clock. And we'll go ahead and discuss. Commissioner Lutfi, would you like to start this one?
Sure. I think this project is, this application is very well done, very thoughtful, modest on many levels, despite the fact that there is lighting here, or especially because they've included lighting here, they've done it in a wonderful way. I want to thank John Graham from the Victorian Society for spending time sharing the history of clocks in on buildings, on the corner of buildings, in buildings where there are tenants that are watch tenants and jewelry tenants. I think it was very informative, and it further cemented my enthusiasm about this project. I think that one of the things that I especially appreciate is the care that the applicant has taken to make sure that they are not doing any damage to the building in terms of the clock on the side. They are fastening it, through the grout joints. And then also in terms of how the signage is being hung behind the glass. It's all very understated and well done. So I can support this.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
Yeah, I support this application. I think the details are refined. They're absolutely refined. And I find the corner clock really quite handsome and sculptural.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, I think the clock is completely appropriate. I was surprised at hearing how much objection there was to it. I think it's fantastic, particularly on a warehouse building. I will note that I'm a little surprised that we're with the signage wrapping around the corners with the clock and the lighting, why it is that they still need to convert the signs on the glass to lit signs. I'm not sure that makes much sense to me, since it's going to be facing both ways and it's going to be visible. The clock sign's going to be visible from everywhere. I don't think it's inappropriate to do it, but I question the need for it.
Thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith?
This is appropriate. I think this building is very muscular and has a lot of presence and can absorb this really nice corner clock. I think that the store as it is now is very subtle. You don't really know it's there. So I can appreciate them wanting to have the illuminated signs in the transoms as well. So I can support this.
Okay, Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I think this is completely appropriate. And I think it'll be very handsome, actually. So I can approve it as presented.
Commissioner Goldblum?
I have trouble with the clock. I think that it's too close to the openings at the base and diminishes the massive quality of the brick corner. If you look at the position of the precedent sign, it was higher up at the second floor level and let the brick kind of breathe and allowed for the massiveness to be experienced. I think that the position of this sign diminishes that, and therefore I do not support the clock in its current location. I could support it if it were a blade sign, if it allowed the brick to remain massive. I have no objections to the glass signs and think that the technology actually is kind of interesting, but I can't support the clock.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire?
I can support this.
Okay, Commissioner Chen?
So can I, and as to Commissioner Goldblum's comment, I think, has not been brought up, but if he thinks the location is too low, I have no problem with moving it slightly higher. But I think it's a very nice accent and is elegantly done. And it is a very heavy industrial building corner, so I don't think the clock will detract from it.
Okay. Commissioner Bland?
I don't often find myself at odds with the majority so completely. I guess with Commissioner Goldblum, no, I am in his camp as well. I find this to be an intrusion, inappropriate, almost diametrically opposed to all those wonderful things that my fellow commissioners have just extolled. So nonetheless, I am against it. I am also, as Michael Goldblum has said, would be in favor of a blade sign, but I'm afraid we're going to go down to seeing a clock on this site if I counted the votes.
Yeah. All right, great. Thank you. It was a great discussion, and thank you all. And we do have a majority in support. So we'll go ahead and make that motion and call the vote and see where we are. Commissioner Lutfi, would you make the motion?
Sure. In the matter of docket 21-09093, 33 9th Avenue, aka 401-403 West 13th Street, the Gansevoort Market Historic District. The neo-Romanesque style warehouse building designed by Boring and Tilton and built in 1902-03. The application is to install signage. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Gansevoort Market Historic District. I recommend approval finding that the installation of signage consisting of letters and logos mounted on a panel attached to the transom bar and 2 clocks and logos installed through the mortar joints at the 9th Avenue and West 13th Street facades will not result in damage to or loss of any significant historic fabric, that the internally illuminated sign, letters, and logos will be mounted on clear acrylic panels approximately 3.5 inches behind the glazed transoms, and therefore the collective group of signage will not substantially reduce transparency at the storefronts. That due to its very narrow size, the exposed vertical conduit between the underside of the transom sign and the transom bar will be barely visible, that the proposed illuminated clocks and logos facing 9th Avenue and West 13th Street will be well proportioned to the size of the building and will not overwhelm the facades, that the proposed corner signage at the 2nd floor will recall signage historically installed at this location, that the installation will not include exposed conduit or junction boxes at the facades, and that the proposed illuminated signs will not diminish the special architectural and historic character of the building and the Gansevoort Market Historic District.
Right, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion? Commissioner Jefferson?
I'm sorry, I second the motion.
Thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and 2 opposed, the motion passes.
So that's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to the next item.
Next item is number 5, LPC 22-01806, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 644, Lot 64, 69 Gansevoort Street in the Gansevoort Market Historic District. This is a 19th century building altered in the modern style by George H. Seuss in 1949, and the application is to construct a rooftop addition.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. Just click on your screen and you can advance the slides with the arrow keys. Please state your name for the record and you may begin.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ward Dennis with Higgins Claysbarth and Partners. I'm joined today by Jerry Calderi of Brownlee Calderi Architects. The project we are presenting is 69 Gansevoort. 69 Gansevoort Street, the building that you see on the right. It was constructed as an art moderne restaurant in 1949, designed by architect George Seuss. It's one of the last purpose-built structures in the historic district and the only non-market building constructed after 1932. The building is probably best known as the former home of Florent Restaurant, a longtime iconic mainstay of the Gansevoort area. While it is a one-story building on the street, we'll see it is actually a two-story structure behind, and our proposal is to construct a two-story addition set back from the Gansevoort Street facade. Sorry, the arrows are not working. This is just showing the building in its location within the Gansevoort Historic District. I think we know this district well, but there really is a tremendous mix of building heights and sizes that reflects the long history of the district and how it evolved over time, both building up and then in a way being deconstructed in the mid-20th century. Sorry. So I mentioned that the building itself was constructed in 1949, the restaurant. Prior to that, it was the home of R&L Lunch, and that was located in a three-story wood frame building that we see tax photo on the left here. That wood frame building was probably constructed sometime in the 1840s, maybe early 1850s, and was 3 stories with retail at the base. What's interesting, though, is if you look at the maps on the right, there was and still is a brick building at the rear of the lot. And that brick building, that rear tenement, is very consistent with a lot of the historic buildings that we see in the area. Probably the last one that remains within the district, certainly the last one that we've been able to identify. So we can see, just peeking up over 69 Gansevoort, the restaurant, this is the top of that rear tenement. And standing on the roof on the top right, it is 1 story. The original tenement was actually 3 stories, and it was cut down to 2 stories at the same time that the front wood frame building was demolished in 1949 to create the restaurant. And then the photo on the bottom right is standing on a neighboring property looking at the rear wall. The rear wall of the tenement, which is 2 stories, sits right at the property line at the rear. These are some images around our area of the Gansevoort district. And I think that, in thinking about the design and the addition on this property, we looked at both the district and the specific history of the site itself. So the juxtaposition of height, the eccentric street grid, and the lowered buildings in the district do create this unique pattern of contrast where the street walls are broken down and views into the center of the block are created. And in these views, we also see this sort of very rich materiality of the district itself, predominantly brick, but with many other materials, including a lot of metal for canopies and other elements. And of course, Gansevoort, the district, has seen a lot of rooftop additions, many of these taking on a very contemporary design that contrasts with the historic masonry below. We approached this as a contemporary addition, but we also wanted to have an addition that was much more related to the history of this building, and that in some ways reflected the more robust and gritty character of this district. I mentioned that our rear tenement had been cut down, and if you notice, the building immediately to the west of us was also cut down, and that the photo on the left shows that building in the process of being lowered from 5 stories to 3 stories. And on the right, we see another example of this. Throughout the district, there are many 2- and 3-story buildings that were formerly much taller. Most of them were cut down in the middle part of the 20th century, really driven by insurance regulations, which required sprinklering above a certain height. And it was more expedient to reduce the height of the building than install sprinklering on upper floors. So this is very much a characteristic of the district, and we see this in our rear tenement, which was 3 stories, reduced to 2. The front building, as I said, was demolished completely, and it is actually one of only 3 or 4 single-story buildings in the whole district, all of which I think are purpose-built. Also, in terms of the district, it's more than just the buildings that are being built up and cut down. This deconstruction happened with the elevated railways, happened with widening of streets and opening up of streets. So we see this sort of very mixed materiality, mixed heights, and the like, which really define the district. And as you see on the right, again, that ability to sort of see into blocks and see these contrasts of heights and forms. So in looking at the design for this, Jerry Calderi, the architect, came across this installation only about a block or 2 away on the Hudson River, David Hammond's sculpture, Day's End, which is a ghost form of a former pier shed on the Hudson River. And this really became the inspiration for part of the design, which you can see here. What we have is on the left an abstraction of the historic wood frame facade, the fenestration pattern of the windows that creates this ghost that is then overlaid on an addition. The addition itself is glass with aluminum. The ghost is Corten steel and sits proud of the facade and creates this screen and really this ghost memory of not only the front building, but also the rear building. As I said, we set this all back from the facade. An important point for us, guiding us in thinking about this, was that we did not want to recreate the three-story building at the street wall. We didn't want to put the addition right on the really lovely Art Moderne building. So we have set it back and we have set it up above the two-story building. And you can see here that the aluminum frame with the very simple glass window walls behind, and then the screen of the Corten. And you can begin to see in the photo on the right how the screen itself is not two-dimensional, it's three-dimensional with the window sleeves creating a texture within the screen itself. And then this here is a section showing the proposal with the existing one-story building. This brick wall that you see back here and back here, this is the existing two-story rear tenement. The addition comes out over and encloses this front wall. It is set back 15 feet at the lower level, about 9 or 10 feet at the upper level. So we do create this setback. We also create this reveal between the roof of the restaurant and the addition above, with the screen coming down over that reveal. And then this is just a drawn section showing the same thing. The floor heights are just under 10 feet at the third floor and 10 feet at the fourth floor. The overall, the setback existing two-story tenement wall can be seen here, and then the front wall of the addition can be seen here, set back and then set forward here. And this is a view showing it in the street context, looking directly on from directly ahead and to either side of the building. It is certainly a visible addition, but it's an addition that ties in both with the texture and not the materials, but the color. And the choice of Corten was really driven by the history of the site and the desire to have material that weathers certainly, but also that has this sort of rich coloration that recalls the brick, can also be seen as an abstraction of the wood frame building itself, and mitigating sort of between the facade plane of the front building and the facade plane of the rear building. And this is just a materials board showing the Corten steel. The addition, the wall behind is again a sort of very simple design. It was chosen that way so as not to compete either with the restaurant below or with the Corten screen. We really wanted that ghost to be the primary reading of the building as you're coming down the street. So Corten steel for the ghost itself, aluminum windows, powder coated, charcoal finish, and aluminum cladding on the upper levels. And these are just a couple technical drawings showing that ghost in Corten steel. And you can see in these drawings again how those window sleeves create more depth on the ghost itself, and the setback dimension or set forward dimension of the ghost from the plane of the facade itself. And these are just additional technical diagrams that again show how we get the texture and depth within the Corten, and then also a drawing of the more simple and modern contemporary window wall behind. And again, additional technical drawings if we want to refer to them. In terms of plans, existing first floor, second floor with the setback brick wall. And then the proposed addition, again, the setback at this lower level at the second floor, the setback is 15 feet. At the upper floors, the setback is about 9 to 10 feet, closer to 10 feet to the window wall itself, about 9 feet to the core 10. And then existing and proposed elevations. What happened? There we go. And then on the rear and side elevations, the addition is proposed to be stucco. We've also designed this to be a very lightweight structure. And we do have an elevator that sits at the rear of the building here. So these two rear windows will be bricked in, leaving a reveal on the brick so that the window openings will still be readable. And then on the side elevations, our west side elevation, there is about a 5 or 6 foot gap between us and the neighboring building. So this side elevation, which again will be a Kime stucco, is visible from the street. On the east side, the side elevation, except maybe at the top corner, is not really visible from the street. Again, sections existing and proposed. You can see the existing 2-story brick building here, and that remains. We're not demolishing that. We're simply building on top of it, the 2-story addition here. Vertical sections front. And then we did do a mock-up. The photo of the mock-up can be seen on the right. And then on the left is the rendered view. As I said, the addition is visible from while walking down Gansevoort Street and while standing directly in front of the building. There is also some visibility of the rear of the addition from the High Line. So this is a view front on, and then a view from the east looking back. The mock-up on the right is a previous application that you reviewed and I think recently approved. And then as you step further away, the addition becomes less visible and you're really seeing the top of the addition. I'm going to skip the zoning diagrams. Again, the last couple pages show additional mock-up views documenting the visibility from the sidewalk immediately in front of the building. As you get further away from the building, it's actually just this very small piece of orange netting. You're really just seeing the very top right corner of the addition from this view. And then this orange piece here is that neighboring building at 65 Gansevoort. Views from the west, as you get further west, this is about the last point immediately across Washington Street where the visibility disappears. And then finally, I did mention that there was visibility from the High Line documented here. In this case, you're really seeing the addition in the context of all the other skyline of Gansevoort and Greenwich Village beyond. So that is the end of the presentation, and we are happy to answer questions.
Great, thank you. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, I don't see any questions at this time. So I know we do have some people here to testify. So we'll move to public testimony and we may have questions after that. So if you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. We will start with anyone who signed up in advance, and I will turn it over to Sasha Seeley to take us through the testimony.
Okay, so first we have for signups, Anna Markham from Village of Preservation. Going to promote you to panelist, Anna. You should be in the meeting. Okay, you can go ahead and unmute your mic. State your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes to speak. Anna, you should be in the meeting. You can go ahead and unmute.
Hello.
Awesome.
Excellent. Apologies for the technical difficulty there.
Yeah.
Hello again, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Anna Markham, and I am the Director of Research and Preservation at Village Preservation. I'm speaking on behalf of the organization today. Village Preservation strongly opposes the rooftop addition at 69 Gansevoort Street. This building holds exceptional significance in the historic district as a one-story establishment and the former home of Florence, a restaurant that played a major role in the revitalization of the neighborhood. The proposed addition is far too large and heavy. The grille at the proposed facade, allegedly designed to tie the building into its historic landscape, does nothing but accentuate the added height and inappropriateness of this addition. The terrace setback also disrupts the streetscape's rhythm. The addition overwhelms the existing buildings and does nothing to relate this structure to its historic surroundings. This is a highly visible site on a key street in the district. We believe that any alteration should be less intrusive and minimally visible. The Gansevoort Market Historic District was the result of a long battle to gain landmarks protection for this rapidly changing neighborhood. The designation report lists the conversion of taller buildings to shorter ones to better accommodate the market economy coupled with other single-story structures as one of the major character-defining features of the district. Unfortunately, the Gansevoort Market Historic District's architectural integrity has been compromised over the years due to a failure to maintain the neighborhood's unique defining features. We strongly urge the commission to reject this proposal and for the applicants to reconsider a more sensitive approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next I have Diego Roballo from the Historic District Council. I'm going to bring you in. Diego, you should be in the meeting. You can go ahead and unmute your mic, state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning, my name is Diego Roballo and I work for the Historic Districts Council. We feel that the proposed addition is oversized and too busy in the context of its modest site. The three-dimensional metal framing, choice of materials, and scale are superfluous and make the design overly competitive with the original structure and surrounding buildings. The concrete parapet wall and facade framing creates a stark and inappropriate contrast of color and material. We suggest that the design be toned down through a decrease in height, removal of metal framing, and altering the concrete framing to be brick, a material compatible in color and style to the neighboring buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I am looking back at the attendance. That concludes our signups and I do not see any more hands raised. So.
Okay, thank you, Sasha. And we did receive the community board's resolution. This is a resolution from Manhattan Community Board 2, recommends approval for the restoration and minor alterations to the existing front building and denial of the addition due to its scale and design. All right, so I'd like to turn back to the applicant and ask if you would like to respond to the comments.
Yes, thank you. First off, I have to correct myself. The rear tenement was 4 stories, not 3 stories. So historically, that was a 4-story building that was reduced to 2 stories in 1949. And as I said in the presentation, this history of building up and taking down of buildings really reflects the history of the district itself and creates this sort of very rich variation in building heights. And of course, we've seen many rooftop additions to various size buildings in this district. We have been striving very hard to make this an addition that relates and speaks directly to the history of the site itself. That combination of a front building and a rear building of 3 and 4 stories, and that also speaks to the district itself in terms of materials and specifically character. We did not try to design something that was overly slick or modern. We added the ghost both to relate to the building itself and its specific history there, but also to the district as well, and to reflect the character the coloration and the like of the district. We did, HDC mentioned, we did consider using brick. As I said, we went with a design and material that was lighter weight intentionally, which we thought was more appropriate to this scale of building and to this size of building, and makes building the addition a lot less intrusive on the building itself.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, commissioners? Any final questions? I guess that I had just one, which I think is maybe I know the answer to from how you've presented it, but I just wanted to sort of hear your explicit thoughts on it. So it is true there is this history of buildings coming down and going up, and the commission has approved additions to some one-story buildings in the district, and they have often been of a sort of a different design and in a setback location. And I think in your proposal and in your presentation, you talked about the setback location and design relating to kind of the back building, sort of the juxtaposition of the two facades, and not maintaining the street wall because you had a back building and the setback kind of related to that. Did you also consider the setback to be a sort of a tool to help both parts be legible, the one-story piece be legible as its one-story condition, and the setback be something else, so that it kind of extended the building but reinforced the historic layer of the one-story building?
Yeah, thank you. As I said in the presentation, it was, I think, a given for us from the beginning that a street wall addition was not what was going to be appropriate here, that designing something as an addition to that Art Moderne restaurant, it would not be appropriate. And so, yes, definitely to set it back. The setback, as I said, sort of straddles that line between where the wood frame building facade was and where the four-story brick building facade was to the rear, and does abstract both of those facades in its way. And the core 10, I guess, is also somewhat ambiguous. As it rusts and weathers, it will, it could look like wood. It has the coloration of brick. It is metal, which recalls all the metal canopies and the like in the district. So I think in that way, the material works very well and creates this interesting dialogue on its own.
Okay, thank you. All right, commissioners, no final questions? All right, I'm not seeing any hands, so I am requesting to unmute all of you so we can begin our discussion. Okay, Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
Make a motion to close the hearing.
And Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And, this is a district where the character was really, at the time of designation, defined as reflecting the sort of waves of adaptive reuse in these buildings, these different periods of different uses, from residential to industrial, commercial, industrial, to ultimately market, and that those waves of adaptive reuse resulted in significant alterations to the buildings. And so we have evaluated proposals for new buildings in that context and have approved visible additions here in a way that we haven't in other districts. So with that said, we'll go ahead and start our discussion. Commissioner Bland, would you like to start this one?
I figured you might call on me. First, I just want to recall so many fun times at Florent, and we miss Florent. But nonetheless, life goes on. For such a little building and a small application for a small building here, it brings up such a wealth of emotions and thoughts in my mind, and I'm happy to go first, but interested also to hear what others say. Maybe too clever by half begins to suggest something that is bugging me about this. There's obviously an easy solution here, which the time and again said they didn't want to do. And I respect that as an artist or an architect here, not wanting to do something for some reason, but I keep coming back and thinking, well, why not? Why not just push forward and have an inventive, clearly of today, but an inventive plug of that missing tooth, rather than keep the missing tooth alive and well as a missing tooth. It's hard to buy all of the cleverness in this unless Ward Dennis is sitting at your elbow as you're standing there on the street looking back at the building. It's hard to understand the complexities of all of the ideas here. I think there's just too much stuff happening to be really understood by the public. And I think there should be a general understanding when somebody looks at a building and says, aha, I sort of get it. And I'm just not kind of getting it. Now I say it's complicated for me because on the other hand, I like to support brave new buildings in historic districts. And this could be seen on the flip side of what I've just said as a brave new building, joining many others, as we know, in this historic district, as a brave new building on top of a smaller existing building. So I'm a little conflicted here to which side of that coin I'm really ready to embrace. But both of them are kind of important ones for me, and I'm really interested in hearing other commissioners.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi?
I have to, I'm sure all of the commissioners have very fond memories of Florent. It's one of those restaurants that has left us that I'm still mourning the passing of everything about it, the look and feel, the food, the wonderful times there. I'm so happy that this little treasure is still there. And I think because Florent was so special on so many levels and is still considered this piece an important cultural and historical and architectural segment or fragment. It's very important that it to me that what goes on top of it doesn't compete with it. But I do feel that it is important. It's fine for something to be on top of it. So the whole rationale that the whole discussion that Ward had about, well, we thought about brick, but we didn't want to do brick because we thought it would compete, and this particular design with the steel framing and the glass kind of doesn't detract from the base is conceptually a great idea. But what I think the issue for me is that there are things about it. There are some things about it that I like very much. I like the fact that it's actually steel and glass. But in some ways, I think it competes too much and it calls too much attention to itself and it takes away from the base. So, for example, and in terms of the context, it's sticking up. I mean, I don't think that the height of this building should exceed the height of the neighboring buildings. And so I think it needs to come down. Does it need to come down a full floor? I don't know, but it needs to come down below the roof line, the roof lines of the buildings adjacent to it. I would also suggest that it step back a little more if it's going to be a modern addition, which I am okay with. And it has been done, as Ward has shown, and as we know, very successfully in so many buildings in the district. One of my favorites being 837 Washington. I also am having a problem with the Corten steel. I don't think that I don't see it.
For a 1950s American doo-wop group whose only hit was S.H. Boom, which they wrote.
Thank you. I don't see a lot of that in this district, and I don't think it goes with this particular building. I think, it could be steel, but it needs to be something else. The palette needs to change a little bit. I think the whole thing has to be a little more understated in that regard. And I mean, that's my, those are my thoughts.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
Using David Hammond as inspiration is fine. And I think it could work here. The issue for me is David Hammond with outlines, and it was a ghost. The idea of the ghost, the idea of this, the idea of the ghost is important. This building is not a ghost. This facade is not a ghost. And if they pushed it back and made it ghost-like, made it conceptual as a ghost, I could see inspiration there. And I could see it pushed back in gray, ghost-like, quiet, push back. In terms of the height, the floor of the two new floors are 11 feet or 11.4, 11.10. They could be reduced down. I think it could be reduced substantially. And if it was ghost-like, pushed back, I could go with the concept of David Hammond's inspiration.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson?
I think I agree largely with one of the comments that Commissioner Bland made, which is that I'm not, the very first thought I had and the remaining thought that's with me is, I don't understand why they rejected the concept of building of the materials of the original building and bringing it to the front and actually going with the easiest approach, which would give them the same amount of space and less obtrusive. And so I think this has got a number of issues for me. So that's where I am.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith?
I appreciate all the thought and the conceptual idea that went behind the design. But I agree with other commissioners that I think it's something that the average person on the streets are not really going to understand. And that the idea of this ghosting is highly abstract, and I don't think it's legible as what it is intended to be. And I think also it competes with the building, which, as other people have said, is such an icon of the neighborhood, and everyone has such fond memories of. I think that whatever is added to, and I think you can add to the building, but I think it needs to be more deferential. I think it needs to be aligned with the adjacent building's roof line and perhaps push back more. And I really like Commissioner Jefferson's idea of sort of making this a more ghostly facade, but pushing it back and having it be more excessive.
All right, great. Thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, as other commissioners, I find that this really doesn't seem contextual. The design doesn't really seem to be working within the district or in response to this building, the existing building that's left. I think the bulk, actually, I think that the building could be here, which is approximately the size of the former building. I'm okay with that, and I agree that it shouldn't exceed the height of adjacent buildings, but I think a fairly large total building would be appropriate. I don't necessarily think his floor needs to be taken off or anything of that nature. I don't know exactly what's not working about the ghost concept. To me, I think it's partly colors, the darkness compared to the existing facade of the existing building. And also even, like the use of the aluminum, to me, I don't necessarily have a problem with a modern addition. I guess I'm kind of looking at it for myself. You could even bring this building forward, not push it back that much. But it needs to really fit in better with the context of the existing neighborhood. And if there's going to be a ghost, yes, the ghost should be separate from the rest of the building, but I'm not sure how that should work. I even think like the cantilever, for example, that's okay for a ghost, but it should maybe come all the way down and meet the first building. I'm really not sure what should be done about it, but I just don't feel that this concept is working. I think it's too much difference between the existing building and the ghost structure above it. They don't seem to relate to each other at all, except in the proportions. And if it's an addition seems large when it's not really seeming similar to other buildings in materiality or color. So that's where I'm at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
I feel bad for Bromley Caldari. This is it's a tough, it's a statement, it's a testament to the difficulty of the challenge that they've posed for themselves. And everyone tiptoeing around and tentatively making suggestions, it is a testament to the difficulty of the problem and how it doesn't seem to suggest an obvious solution. So, I guess you've bitten off a big thing to do here. I'm reluctant to add more chaos to the mix, but I think that I agree with Fred and John in feeling that the frame structure would work better as a suggestion of a memory of a previous building if it were at the street line. I think on other buildings that might qualify as quote unquote ghosts in our and I think that there are some buildings that do function in that manner. Morris Adjmi did a building out of glass block that echoed a building that was there in brick. There's that building on Duane Park where the frame is there, but the building's really behind it. There's a building also in Tribeca with those fancy glass block bricks that was like an extension of the building that had been cut down, I think. And there are examples that you can look at and judge their relative success or lack thereof. And I think that would help. Another clue that I would suggest looking at is, like Diana said, grappling a little bit more with the current building and its facade, given how warmly it is recalled. I think that an engagement with the Art Deco version of the building, a discussion with it, would benefit the addition, and that might inform the selection of materials. Maybe you don't use Corten, maybe you use aluminum or stainless. Maybe there's color involved, something that would kind of help it tie in to the current, or the more current but deeply beloved version. I also think that the height is problematic for me. Whereas in the past, the building to the left was considerably taller and this would have sat against it. I think that the current streetscape, which has been there for quite some time, is relatively uniform with gaps in it. And I think that this being the tallest in the row is problematic for me. But I think it's an interesting and challenging project, and I'm sure you'll come up with something worth looking at next time.
All right, great. Thank you. Commissioner Devonshire.
I appreciate the narrative about how this design came about, and I don't know, there's been a lot of discussion about whether it has achieved ghostliness or not. And frankly, I don't think that's what I mostly care about. What I care about most is the dialogue with the Art Moderne building that is there. And with this one, with the size of it, I think it's too tall. I think it's too prominent. It overwhelms that existing building. With regard to the design, I think they certainly missed the ghost mark, and I will leave it to my other fellow commissioners to have given enough direction in that realm. So it's too large. It does not have a dialogue with the Art Moderne extant building.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Chen.
Well, the benefit of going last is obviously having the benefit of listening to all the comments. And so I just want to revert back to what Vice Chair Bland said at the very beginning, and I think he's hit it right on the head. To me, at this moment, there are two basic approaches. One is that you bring forward the building and fill in, but I hate dental work, so I never enjoy the filling in, especially for this moment, for this case. Obviously, to me, the answer is quite obvious. This building has to be set back because the reference is to the former one-story veranda. And if you set it back, it articulates that one-story building. And I do agree with most of the comments about the material, the scale, the height, the texture need to be restudied. And I think that's where we should be at. I think that the attempt whether to whatever the prior suggestion. So I won't make further confusion into the direction, but I do think the approach should be a setback, at least in my mind.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you all, commissioners, for your thoughtful comments on this interesting presentation. And so I think we've heard from everybody that conceptually there may be an idea here, but that it's not really fully realized from the commissioner's point of view in this proposed scheme. And we've heard suggestions on how to either sort of go with that concept, that conceptual design idea, and have it fit within the district, or to think of it in a different way. So we will leave it to you all to absorb the comments. The staff can help with you and help sort through them. And we'll see you back with a revised proposal when you're ready, and we'll take no action today. So thank you. All right, so we are a little ahead of schedule. We're going to break for lunch now, and then we have 2 items after lunch. So we will resume sort of on schedule with those last 2 items. So we'll break now until 12:45. So we'll ask all members of the public to exit the meeting and rejoin the meeting at 12:45. And commissioners, you just need to turn your audio and video off. Thank you. See you soon.